Today we are building the ultimate Gwen Stacy Ghost Spider commander deck, the new double-faced commander from the latest Magic the Gathering set, Spider-Man. This is a Exile Matters commander deck, and you could quite easily build it using the Cascade and the Discover mechanics, or you could build it like this. Let's do this. Gwen Stacy is 2 mana, 1 red, for a legendary creature human performer hero that's a 2/1. When Gwen Stacy enters, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card for as long as you control this creature, and for 5 mana, 2 and a Jeskai, transform Gwen Stacy, activate only as a sorcery. A solid card, no doubt, but not the focus of this deck. Ghost Spider is 5 mana, 2 and a Jeskai, for a legendary creature spider human hero that's a 4/4 with flying, vigilance, and haste. Whenever you play a land from exile or cast a spell from exile, put a +1/+1 counter on Ghost Spider. And then you can remove 2 counters from Ghost Spider, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. The main objectives for this deck are to cast Ghost Spider as soon as possible, then exile cards from the top of our library, and finally play primarily from those exile cards rather than our hand. That will become the core synergy of this deck, as it's what will trigger Ghost Spider multiple times each turn, allowing her to grow in power, and with their built-in evasion and haste, it means we can start smashing down opponents' life totals rather quickly. For this commander to be successful, we still need to make sure we eat our vegetables. Ramp, card draw, protection, interaction, and support. These are all key synergies that we will need to claim that victory. Our first objective is to get Ghost Spider onto the battlefield, so we need to talk ramp and mana. We need all 3 colours and 5 mana by turn 4. So with some math, we know to include at least 41 lands to give us a 75% chance of getting 4 or more by turn 4, and at least 12 ramp spells to give us a 74.3% chance of drawing 1 or more of those by turn 3, allowing us to cast our commander successfully on turn 4. For artifacts, we're running Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, and all 3 talismans, Conviction, Creativity, and Progress, along with Wayfarer's Bauble, Belwar Stone, and Chromatic Lantern to help with that colour fixing. We're also running Curse of Opulence, which has the added benefit of helping direct attacks towards our opponent, Crystal Skull of the Aesir Spyglass, which as well as being a mana rock, lets us look and cast from the top of our library. More on this synergy later. Professional Facebreaker makes us treasures and also helps exile cards off the top. Glimpse of the Impossible allows us to exile cards off the top, and for each one that we don't cast, we make a mana dork. Lastly, we have Jeska's Will and Descent into Avernus. Descent helps whittle down our opponent's life totals while speeding up the game dramatically, which favours this deck's playstyle, and Jeska's Will allows us to ramp out our commander early, or in the mid to late game, exile cards and give us the mana to cast them, triggering our commander. To make sure we find all the right pieces of our deck before we start exiling cards off the top of our library, we need some actual card draw. Not a lot, but just enough to get by. With 7 pieces of card draw, we have a 60.7% chance to get 1 or more of them by turn 5, allowing us to start refilling our hand after casting our commander on turn 4. Mystic Remora is one of the best 1-drop draw spells you can play in Commander. Romantic Rendezvous is just very on theme for this deck, and a common effect that we see within red. Frostcliff Siege allows us to draw cards whenever we hit with creatures. Valakut Awakening lets us get rid of any unwanted cards and redraw, your own personal wheel effect. Vega the Watcher and Whirlwind Our Thought are fantastic draw payoffs for what we are doing within this deck. And the Spider Mark II is another draw payoff for when our commander hits, plus it's a good body to have on the battlefield. With the ramp and the supporting card draw taken care of, we can now start looking at the core synergy of the deck, exiling cards from the top of our library. Light Up the Stage, Reckless Impulse, Rend Resolve, Embrace the Unknown, and Inspired Tinkering, all exile cards that we can then play until the end of our next turn. Glimpse the Impossible and Jeska's Will, exile cards that we then have to play this turn. Inti, Party Thrasher, and the Harnfell Horn all allow us to discard cards to exile cards, meaning any dead draws we have can now be turned into value to trigger our commander and help us slowly churn through our deck. Count on Luck, Tavern Brawler, and Headliner Scarlet give us consistent triggers to exile cards from our library, forming an engine for this deck. Lelia Blade Reforged and Professional Facebreaker triggers all happen in and around combat, Lelia getting bigger every time we do what this deck is doing, and Facebreaker turning any excess mana into more card advantage. Eruth the Tormented Prophet is a replacement effect for any draw, which makes sure our deck is ticking along nicely. Urianga gives us some life gain to stay in the game, as well as allowing to exile cards and then cast them at a reduced rate. Lastly, we have Ensnared by the Mara, which gives opponents a choice. Let us cast more stuff from exile, or they take damage instead, which leads us nicely into our sub-theme of this deck, direct damage. Because our commander deck is quite low to the ground with an average mana value of 2.58, we're relying heavily on our commander and other smaller creatures to get in and do our damage for us, which can be a bit of a problem in convoluted board state when our attacks aren't always possible, so a direct damage sub-theme helps us circumvent this problem. The first card is Passionate Archaeologist, which is a fantastic card for Exile Matters themed decks, and I've already mentioned Ensnared by the Mara. Spider-Man 2099 allows us to get some extra damage in on our end step, and Descent into Avernus deals damage on our upkeep. I've already spoken about the benefits of this in our ramp section earlier, but it also pairs very nicely with Professional Facebreaker. And lastly, we have Delayed Blast Fireball, a direct damage spell and also a mini sweep effect, all in one card, and there is obviously a very high chance that we are going to be casting this from exile. Now we have our early game setup complete and our main game plan in place, we need to focus on how we are going to protect that game plan while also interrupting our opponents. For protection, we have Boros Charm and Akroma's Will, fantastic cards that can protect our board state from sweepers or help us push in for the win. Swiftfoot Boots and Wind Boots give our commander Hexproof or Ward 4, giving them a greater protection from targeted removal. Next we have Untimely Malfunction, Deflecting Swat, Bolt Bend and Hydroelectric Specimen to redirect anything that targets permanents we control, or we can even use them when someone is going for an advantageous play and mess with their board state. Sedgery Shelter and Sink into Stupor are two fantastic MDFCs that give either protection or return a pesky permanent back to its opponent's hand. I also chose to run Take the Bait, as not only does it prevent combat damage to you, but then sends those attackers at your opponents, so we're guaranteed to either kill some creatures or deal direct damage to an opponent's life total, which is not bad for 4 mana. Speaking of goad effects, it also makes sense to run Taunt from the Rampart. I'm starting to view this as somewhere between a direct damage spell and a sweeper effect, as just like Take the Bait, it forces damage onto our opponents and most times we'll get some creatures killed in the process, which helps remove those complicated board states which we don't want to see. And of course Delayed Blast Fireball, which I mentioned earlier, as it is probably the best Exile Matters board wipe style effect in Magic the Gathering right now. And lastly, just before we jump into our supporting elements with top deck manipulation, we need to look at our interaction and removal for our opponents. We have 10 cards here, which between them are capable of targeting all permanent types. We have a 74.3% chance to draw one or more of those by turn 5, making sure as soon as our opponents think their game plan is online, we can then start to interact and take it down. Pungify and Rapid Hybridization destroy any creatures in our way, while Swords to Plowshare and Resculpt can exile creatures, which is great when facing against graveyard decks. Generous Gift, Stroke of Midnight are our catch-all removal pieces as they hit any non-land permanent. Generous Gift obviously being able to hit lands as well. Wear, Tear and Untimely Malfunction can get rid of any artifacts or enchantment that are causing us bother on the battlefield. Imprisoned in the Moon allow us to lock down any serious threat on the board, turning it into a colourless land. And obviously Boros Charm once again doing some work, being able to deal 4 damage to a player or a planeswalker, finishing them off or giving a creature double strike in combat to boggles our opponent out of what they thought was a favourable trade. Every commander deck needs cards that support its main game plan, whether that's to stay in the game longer or help you get across the finish line. PNLR and Lost in the Damned, as they let us create a board state every time we cast a card or play a land from exile, which is obviously the main theme of this deck. Sensei's Divining Top, Reality Chip, Urianga and Crystal Skull all let us look at the top card of our library and even cast from there if we meet the requirements. This means in our upkeep, before we draw, we can check what's on top of our deck, and cast our exile effects before we draw, allowing to select what might be in our hand or exile for the following turn. Before we go into the mana base, I just want to highlight a few key cards within this supporting section that really do take us to victory. Boros Charm just gives us such versatility within this deck. Once our commander is at 11 power, Double Strike makes her into a one-hit kill. This is also why we are running Legion's Leadership within the deck. Inti not only allows us to exile cards, but can also give us Trample, one of the best keywords when it comes to creating large creatures within Commander. Akroma's Will is much like Boros' Charm, and just chef's kiss. Such a great card within this deck. Headliner Scarlet is a sneaky card, not only because it enables our exile synergies, but also because it turns off blocking for an opponent, giving all players an opportunity to whittle them down to 0. If it wasn't clear by this point, this is not a budget deck. So for our mana base, we are running Shocks, Fetchers, Surveillance, Battle Bond lands, Pain lands, Pathways, and Slow land. With our curve being so low to the ground and needing all 3 colours by turn 4, we don't want our lands to tempo ourselves out of the game. You could indeed play this commander deck with a slower, more budget friendly mana base, but I would just urge you to remember that this deck is not a late game deck, so your success may vary. This is predominantly a red deck, and it plays mostly like one, even though it's being supported by both white and blue cards. There is a full deck list in the description, and I urge you to go playtest it. There's a whole collection of cards in the considering section which didn't make my final cut, but could be good includes for your playstyle. I would like to shout out the newly spoiled cards Arana, Heroes Hangout, and Interdimensional Webwatch, as they could easily see play within this style of deck. If you would like to see more deck techs like this, why not check out this video over here? Or if you would like to subscribe to more content like this, please click over here. Now, do me a favour and let me know what commander decks you are building down in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching, I appreciate your support as always, and I shall see you all in the next video. Goodbye for now.